I never meant for any of it to happen. I never planned to stand in front of that mirror, heart hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears, wearing something that changed everything I thought I knew about myself. But life has a way of pulling you toward the truth you've been running from, and eventually, no matter how fast you run, the truth catches up.
This is my story.
All of it. Even the parts that still make my hands shake when I think about them. My name is Callum. I was 23 years old, living alone in a small apartment on the edge of a city that never really noticed me, working a data entry job that paid just enough to keep the lights on and the refrigerator half full. From the outside, I was nothing remarkable. A quiet guy, kept to himself, polite when spoken to, invisible when not. That was the version of me the world got to see. The other version, the one that lived in the space between sleeping and waking, the one that pressed its face against the glass of my real life and breathed fog onto it, that version was something else entirely. I had carried a secret for 11 years. Since I was 12 years old, I had felt something that I did not have words for back then. A pull. A longing that was not about anyone else, not about attraction or desire in the way people usually talk about those things. It was something quieter and more personal and far more terrifying. It was a longing to be seen differently, to be soft in a world that had always told me to be hard, to wear something that moved, to look in a mirror and feel something other than the vague disappointment I had carried my whole life. I wanted to dress as a woman.
There.
I said it. And even now, even after everything that happened, those words still land with weight. Not because I am ashamed of them anymore, but because I remember what it felt like to hold them inside for over a decade, pressing them down into the darkest corner of myself, hoping they would suffocate and die. They never did. They just waited. And on a Tuesday evening in October, when the rain was sliding down my apartment windows and I had nowhere to be and no one expecting anything of me, they finally came up for air. It started with a box. My upstairs neighbor, a woman named Priya, had asked me 3 weeks earlier if I would hold some boxes for her while she was between storage units. Priya was friendly in the distracted way of someone who was always slightly too busy for the conversation she was in the middle of. She taught secondary school. She was forever grading something, and she smelled faintly of dry erase markers and cardamom tea. I said yes, of course. I told her she could store whatever she needed in my spare room. She brought down 4 large cardboard boxes and 1 medium-sized plastic storage tub with a blue lid. She thanked me. She went back upstairs. I forgot about the boxes almost immediately because they were just boxes, and there was nothing interesting about boxes. Until the medium tub fell off the stack. I had gone into the spare room to find my old laptop charger, and I knocked against the stack without meaning to, and the plastic tub came down, and the blue lid popped off, and everything inside spilled across the floor of my spare room. I stood there and looked at what had fallen out. Clothing. Women's clothing.
Priya's, obviously.
Folded things that were now unfolded. A dark emerald wrap dress, a pair of black wide-leg trousers, some blouses, and sitting on top of all of it, having somehow landed face up, a small clear pouch of makeup. I should have just put it all back. I should have folded everything neatly, tucked it back into the tub, pressed the blue lid on, and stacked it back with the others and gone to find my charger. I know what I should have done. But I stood there in the doorway of my spare room, and I looked at that emerald dress lying across my floor, and something inside my chest cracked open like an egg. A warmth flooded into the space left behind. And before any rational part of my brain could step in and remind me of all the reasons this was a terrible idea, I was crouching down and touching the fabric of the dress. It was soft. Not the stiff, artificial softness of something cheap. It was a heavy, flowing kind of soft, the fabric substantial between my fingers, with a slight drape to it, the kind of fabric that moved with intention. I held it up. I looked at it. The rain tapped against the window at the end of the hallway. My heart was doing something unusual inside my chest. Not quite racing. More like waking up. Like someone had found a switch inside me that had been in the off position for so long the dust had settled on it, and they had just flicked it, and now all these lights were coming on in rooms I had forgotten existed. I carried the dress to my bedroom. I told myself I was just going to see what it looked like. That was all. Just look. Not try it on. Just hold it against myself and look in the mirror and satisfy this stupid curiosity that had been living inside me for 11 years like a tenant that refused to pay rent or leave. Just look. I stood in front of the mirror on the back of my bedroom door and held the dress against the front of my body. And I looked. And the thing that happened next is very hard to explain. It was not dramatic. There was no music. No sudden revelation that split the sky open. It was something much quieter and much more devastating than that. I looked at myself in the mirror, at my face above the emerald fabric, and for just 1/2 of 1 second, I did not see a disappointment. I put the dress back. I shoved everything into the tub. I pressed the blue lid on. I stacked it back. I found my charger. I went to the kitchen and made coffee and sat with my hands wrapped around the mug and stared at the wall for a long time. I told myself that was that. That was not that. 3 nights later, I was back in the spare room. This time, I didn't hold the dress against myself. This time, I took it into the bathroom, the room in my apartment with a lock, and I undressed, and I pulled the wrap dress on over my head, and I tied the fabric sash at my side the way I had seen tied in a video I had watched at 2 in the morning 3 nights in a row. My hands were shaking. Not from cold. The bathroom was warm. The shaking was from something that lived below the level of temperature. It was fear and excitement twisted together so tightly I could not have separated them with a knife. The fabric settled against my skin. I had not known, before that moment, that clothing could feel like this. Like being held. The wrap of the sash at my waist, the way the fabric skimmed across my thighs when I shifted my weight, the slight coolness of it against my skin in a way that my usual clothes, jeans and cotton t-shirts and shapeless hoodies, never were. My usual clothes existed to cover me. This dress existed to touch me. I reached up and put my hand on the door handle. My reflection was on the other side of that door. The full-length mirror. The real test. I stood there with my hand on the handle for what felt like a very long time. Long enough that the shaking in my hands moved up into my arms. Long enough that I had a complete internal argument with myself, a real one, both sides fully represented, concluding with the simple, unavoidable fact that I had come too far to back out now, that turning back now would be its own kind of damage, something I would add to the long list of things I had refused to allow myself. I opened the door. I walked to the mirror. I looked. The person looking back at me was not who I expected to see. I need you to understand something. I had certain beliefs about myself, about how I would look. I had spent 11 years constructing, in my imagination, an image of how this would go, and that image was always tinged with something close to humiliation. I expected to look ridiculous. I expected the reflection to confirm everything I was afraid of. I expected to see a man dressed in women's clothing in the most laughable and pathetic sense of that description. That is not what I saw. What I saw was complicated. What I saw required me to sit down on the edge of my bed, which I did, slowly, without taking my eyes off the mirror, the way you might sit down carefully when you have received news that your body hasn't quite processed yet. I did not look like a woman. I was not delusional. I knew what I was seeing. But I also did not look ridiculous. The dress fit better than I had any right to expect. I was lean, always had been, and without a great deal of width in my shoulders, and the wrap style of the dress created a shape in the mirror that was its own thing. Not male, not female, something in between, something that existed in a language I did not have words for, but that my body recognized with a shock of familiarity, so acute it was almost painful. I looked at myself, and I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt like I was looking at something true. I sat on the edge of my bed in Priya's emerald dress, and I cried. Not sobbing. Not the dramatic kind. Just tears, quiet and steady, sliding down my face while I looked at my reflection, and the reflection cried too. Both of us making the same face, which was something between grief and relief, something between the ending of a long pretense and the terrifying beginning of whatever came next. I did not know what I was. I did not know what any of this meant about me. I was not going to solve that question sitting on my bed in a borrowed dress at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. But I knew something I had not known before. I knew that the secret I had been keeping was not something shameful. It was something real. And real things deserve better than the dark corner I had shoved this one into. I took the dress off. I folded it carefully. I put it back in the tub. I lay in bed that night and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and I started researching. I want to be honest about what followed, because this is the part of these stories that people often skip over in favor of the dramatic moments. But the weeks that came after that first night were quiet and complicated and deeply important. I read everything I could find. I watched videos carefully in private browser windows with my headphones in about gender identity and gender expression and what it meant to feel the way I felt. I found forums and communities of people who used words I had never heard applied to me, who described experiences I recognized the way you recognize a song you haven't heard since childhood, every note landing in a place that has always known it. I was not transgender, or at least I did not feel that I was. I did not feel that I had been born in the wrong body in the way I understood it from the people who described that experience. What I felt was something more specific. I was a man who needed, sometimes, to not present as one, who felt something come alive in myself when the presentation shifted, who had a relationship with femininity that was not about pretending to be something I wasn't, but about accessing something I genuinely was, a part of myself that had been starved of light for 11 years and was now turning toward any source it could find. I found words.
Crossdresser was one of them.
Gender fluid was another. Non-binary sat close to it. None of them fit perfectly, and eventually I stopped trying to make them fit perfectly because I was not a category, I was a person, and persons are always too complicated for their categories. But here's what I knew. I needed to do this again. And I needed to do it properly. I waited until I was certain Priya would be away for a full weekend. She mentioned, one evening in the hallway, that she was going to visit her sister in Edinburgh for the weekend. I nodded.
I said that sounded nice.
And I felt my pulse lift, just slightly, the way it does when something important is approaching. Friday evening. Priya gone for the weekend. I drove to the large shopping center on the edge of the city at 5:30, wearing my usual clothes, hood up against the October chill, and I went inside. I went to the women's section. The first time you do something you have wanted to do for a long time, there is always a gap between the imagined version and the real one. In my imagination, I had pictured walking into the women's section as a moment of transgression, of visible wrongness, of every eye in the place turning toward me with accusation. What actually happened was that nobody cared. A woman with a pushchair moved past me without a glance. A teenager held a dress against herself in a mirror nearby and made a face at her reflection. A shop assistant was folding jumpers with the focused expression of someone who had somewhere better to be. I was invisible, as I had always been. But for once in my life, being invisible was the greatest gift I could have been given. I moved through the rails slowly. I touched fabrics. I had done enough research by this point to know what I was looking for roughly in terms of sizes and cuts that might work on a body shaped like mine. I pulled things from rails carefully, trying to look casual, trying to look like a man shopping for a girlfriend or a sister, which was a cover story I had prepared in elaborate detail in case anyone asked, but which no one ever asked for. I found a dark navy satin blouse. I found a midi skirt in a deep burgundy, the kind that would move when I walked. I found a pair of simple stud earrings clip-on because my ears were not pierced. I found, in the beauty section, a small haul of makeup items, a tinted moisturizer, a mascara, an eyebrow pencil, a nude lip gloss, and a small palette of eyeshadow in warm, wearable tones. I stood in the queue to pay, and my heart was doing the thing again. The waking up thing. The lights coming on thing. I paid. I left. I drove home in the dark with a bag on the passenger seat and something singing quietly in my chest. I put the bag on my bedroom floor and sat beside it for a while before I opened it. Then I went into the bathroom and I started. I want to describe this carefully because the getting ready part of that evening was, in its own way, one of the most significant hours of my life. I had watched tutorials. Many of them. More than was probably necessary, and yet, standing in front of my bathroom mirror with the tinted moisturizer in my hand, probably not enough. I started with the moisturizer, smoothing it across my face with my fingertips, the cool slip of it on my skin, blending it at my jawline and temples the way the tutorials had shown, and watched my face even out in the mirror, the redness and unevenness settling, my features becoming something cleaner and more composed. Then the eyebrow pencil. This was the one I had been most nervous about. My brows were decently shaped, not too thick, not too angular, and I had read that shaping the brow was one of the most powerful changes you could make to a face. I worked slowly, filling in sparse areas, extending the arch very slightly, following the line that was already there without exaggerating it. My hand was not perfectly steady. I wiped and started again twice. The third attempt was close enough. The eyeshadow. I kept it very simple, the way the tutorials for beginners said to: a medium warm brown on the lid, a slightly lighter shade blended above it and into the crease, a small amount of highlighting shade on the inner corner. It took longer than I expected. My left eye was better than my right eye. I did the right eye twice. The mascara changed something. I did not expect the mascara to change something, but it did. My eyes, which I had always thought of as simply eyes, not remarkable, not a particular feature of note, suddenly had depth. Suddenly drew the gaze. I looked at myself in the mirror with the mascara wand still in my hand, and I saw my eyes as if for the first time. I stood very still. Then I put the mascara down and touched the lip gloss on, a very small amount, just a hint of something across my lips. I looked at my face. My face did not look like a woman's face, not entirely, not with my jaw and my brow bone, and the structure of my face beneath. But it looked like a face that had been given attention and care, and something like softness. It looked like a face I wanted to keep looking at, which was not something I had ever felt about my face before. I went back into the bedroom, and I changed. The satin blouse went on first. Satin is a specific kind of sensory experience that I am not sure I can fully describe to someone who has never paid attention to it. It is cool and weightless and somehow also rich, the way the light catches on it and shifts when you move. I buttoned the small buttons carefully from the bottom up, feeling the smooth glide of each button through each hole, and when the last one was done and I pulled the fabric straight and looked down at myself, I felt the specific pleasure of something fitting well. The midi skirt had a zip at the side, and I had to do something slightly awkward with my arm to get it done up, and for a moment I felt very alone in the way you feel alone when you need a hand but there is no one there to provide one. But I got it. The skirt settled against my waist and fell to mid-calf, the burgundy fabric moving slightly in a way that satin and cotton never moved, with a softness and intentionality. I clipped the earrings on, small silver studs, and then I walked to the mirror. I want to pause here. I want to try to explain what the mirror showed me, because this was different from the first time in ways that were hard to measure but were immediately and completely obvious. The first time, in Priya's borrowed dress, I had seen something complicated and surprising and moving. I had cried. But there had also been a wrongness to it, an incompleteness, because I had not done anything to my face, and the dress was not mine, and everything about it was provisional and stolen. This was different. This was mine. The clothes were mine. I had chosen them with my own hands and my own eye, and my own growing understanding of what I was looking for. The makeup was mine, done by my own uncertain hands, imperfect but honest. The earrings were small and silver, and they caught the light of my bedroom lamp and gave back a small gleam. I looked at myself for a long time. The person in the mirror was me. That was not in question. I could see myself, the bones of my face, the shape of my body, the particular way I held my shoulders that I had always done, and probably always would. I was looking at Callum. But I was looking at a Callum I had never been allowed to see before. A Callum who was softer, who moved through a visual language that felt native to something inside him that had been waiting a long time to be spoken. I turned sideways. The skirt moved. I brought my hand up and touched my own face. The person in the mirror did the same thing, and we looked at each other, both of us quiet, both of us wide-eyed, both of us trying to take in what we were seeing. I whispered something to myself. I do not remember exactly what I said. Something like, "There you are." Something like that. And then I sat down on my bed again, same as before, same careful lowering of myself onto the edge of the mattress, same looking at the mirror from a distance, and I let myself just exist in it for a while. Not analyzing, not categorizing, not trying to figure out what I was or what this meant or what I was going to do about it. Just existing in a body that felt, for the first time in a very long time, like somewhere I actually lived. I stayed like that for a long time. Then the phone rang. My phone on the bedside table lit up and rang, and the sound of it was like a stone through a window, and I lunged for it before I even knew what I was doing, and I looked at the screen. My flatmate from university, Desmond. We had lived together for 2 years during our degrees and remained the kind of friends who went months without speaking and then picked up exactly where they had left off. He was calling from London, where he had moved for work. He called occasionally on Friday evenings because he was, by his own admission, not great at making friends in new cities. I stared at the phone. I could not answer it. That was not a rational thought. He was in London. He could not see me. He was just calling for a chat, the same way he always did, wanting to complain about his commute and ask me what I was watching and tell me about whoever he was currently half-heartedly dating. He would not know, from my voice, that I was sitting on my bed in a burgundy midi skirt with mascara on. There was no way he could know. And yet I could not answer it. The thought of speaking to someone who knew me, of carrying on a normal conversation while sitting inside something this private and this significant, was something I was not ready for. It felt like if I answered, if I let the outside world into this room, something would break. Some spell I had not known I was under. I let it ring out. He did not leave a voicemail. He never did. He would text later, something like, "Missed you, call me when you are not being a hermit," and I would reply when I was back to being the version of me he knew. I sat with the phone in my hand and looked at the mirror and felt the particular weight of a secret. This is the thing about secrets, the thing no one tells you when you are young and learning to keep them. They are not static. They do not stay the same shape and weight over time. They grow. They shift. Sometimes they become lighter as you carry them longer because you get stronger, your carrying muscles develop. But sometimes, and this is the kind that was happening to me, they become heavier. Not because you are growing weaker, but because the secret itself is growing, taking up more room, pressing against the walls of the space you have built for it, and you are starting to understand that there is not a container in the world that will hold it forever. I spent that Friday evening in my bedroom in my new clothes, and I did something I had not done in years. I danced. I played music from my phone, quiet enough that it would not carry to the hallway, music I would not usually have chosen, something soft and building, and I stood in front of the mirror and I moved. Nothing skilled. Nothing rehearsed. Just my body finding what it felt like to move in a skirt, which was a completely different experience of motion than anything I was used to. The fabric shifted and swept with each step. The satin of the blouse shimmered under the lamp. I was not graceful. I was not trying to be graceful. I was just trying to be. At some point I started laughing. Not because anything was funny. Because something in me had been so tightly wound for so long, and it was releasing, and laughter was what came out when it did. I had not expected joy. I had expected relief. Maybe. I had expected the mixed thing of shame and satisfaction that I had been told, by the darker corners of the internet I had sometimes stumbled into before I found the better corners, was what cross-dressers felt. Shame and satisfaction, together, inseparable. What I felt was joy. Pure and simple and just slightly terrifying because of how pure and simple it was. Because simple things, when they come after a long time of complexity, feel almost too good to be true. They feel like something you will have taken from you. I stayed dressed until nearly midnight. Then I carefully removed the makeup with the cotton pads and micellar water I had bought for the purpose, and I changed back into my regular clothes, and I put everything away in the bag I had bought it in, and I hid the bag in the back of my wardrobe behind my winter coats. I lay in bed.